I was standing by the front door with my suitcase, ready to fly to Europe with my daughter, Lindsay, when a text message arrived. The message said that I was no longer coming with them. My son-in-law, Todd, wanted the trip to be a family-only vacation. They had brought his parents along instead, leaving me behind. I had just paid for their new house, so in response, I canceled all the payments and sold it. I was folding my favorite blue travel shirt when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. The soft cotton felt good as I smoothed out the wrinkles, imagining wearing it for dinner in that little bistro Lindsay had found near the Louvre. My suitcase was open on the bed, half filled with clothes carefully selected for our European trip. The weather app showed sunny skies in Paris, perfect for the walking tours I had printed out and tucked into my carry-on. I had been humming an old Frank Sinatra song while I tried to decide between my brown leather shoes and my comfortable sneakers. The tickets to Paris and my passport were sitting on my nightstand, crisp and ready. Our flight was departing in 6 hours. A familiar rush of nervous excitement was fluttering in my chest. My phone buzzed again, and Lindsay's name appeared on the screen. I set the shirt down and picked up the phone, expecting some last-minute details about meeting at the airport. Instead, I saw words that made my blood run cold. I was told I was not coming to Europe with them. Todd had decided this vacation should be for family only. I read the text once, then twice, then a third time, my thumb hovering over the screen, hoping the words would somehow change. The sweater I had been about to fold remained suspended in my hands as my mind struggled to process what I was seeing. The phrase family only just kept repeating itself in my head. I was her father. I had planned this entire trip. I had bought the tickets, researched the restaurants, and mapped out the itinerary during countless late-night planning sessions. I had no idea what family only was supposed to mean in this context. I sat down heavily on the edge of the bed. My hands trembled as I typed back the only response I could manage. Okay. A heavy stone of disappointment settled deep in my chest. I looked around the room, seeing all the things I had prepared for a trip that would never happen. The travel-sized toiletries lined up on my dresser, the guidebooks filled with sticky notes, and the brand-new camera I had bought for the vacation, still in its box. I closed the suitcase with slow, deliberate movements. Each click of the latches sounded so final in the quiet room. I then called the airline and listened to the hold music while I waited to cancel my ticket. The customer service representative sounded sympathetic as she said she was sorry to hear about my change of plans. I wondered if she could hear the disappointment in my voice. Afterward, I sat in my living room, staring at the travel brochures scattered across my coffee table. The house felt emptier and quieter than usual. Outside, a dog was barking, its sharp sound breaking the suburban stillness. I picked up one of the brochures, a glossy pamphlet about Roman architecture, and set it on the end table. The gesture felt small and meaningless, but it was all I could do in that moment. I understood then that I had been intentionally left behind. Evening arrived with the same quiet emptiness that had filled the house all day. I moved through the hours like a ghost, leaving the dinner dishes in the sink instead of washing them right away, which was my usual habit. The packed suitcase still sat by my bedroom door, a constant reminder of my broken plans. The television was murmuring in the living room, but I wasn't really watching the evening news. I kept checking my phone for no particular reason, just to keep my fingers busy and distract myself from the hollow feeling in my chest. Maybe Facebook would offer some distraction. I scrolled past photos of a cat, recipe shares from my book club, and political posts I didn't want to read. The familiar blue glow of the screen was strangely comforting in the growing darkness of the living room. Then I saw it. Todd's parents were standing in front of the Eiffel Tower, both of them grinning for the camera with that satisfied look of a tourist who had found the perfect photo opportunity. The caption read, "Beginning of the best family vacation ever." The timestamp showed it had been posted 2 hours ago. My thumb froze above the screen. Maybe they had taken a separate trip, or maybe it was an old photo they had just decided to share. My heart started beating faster as I clicked on the profile to see more photos. There it was, same location, same time, but this photo included 4 people. Todd's parents, Todd, and Lindsay were all clustered together in front of a Parisian cafe. There were wine glasses on the table behind them. Lindsay's caption made my stomach drop. So grateful for family time in the city of light. My fingers trembled as I counted the 4 faces in the picture. The word family burned in my mind. I set the phone down on the coffee table, its screen still glowing with their happy faces. I stood up and walked to the kitchen window, looking out at my neighbor's house where warm light spilled from the windows, illuminating a family gathered together for the evening. The feeling of betrayal came in waves, each one stronger than the last. I picked up the phone again, hoping I had misunderstood somehow, hoping the photos would tell a different story. But they were still there. The timestamps were fresh, and their smiles were bright and carefree. The 4 of them were together in the city I had dreamed of visiting, spending the vacation I had planned, and using the itinerary I had researched. I walked back to the kitchen window and saw my own reflection staring back at me, ghostly and hollow-eyed. The phone screen showed their group photo behind my reflection. Their happiness was overlaid with my solitary image in the glass. The contrast was stark and painful, a visual reminder of exactly where I stood in their definition of family. I had barely slept, tossing and turning as images of their vacation photos played behind my closed eyelids. Morning came with a gray light filtering through my bedroom curtains, and I knew I needed answers. I couldn't just let this happen without understanding why. My coffee mug shook slightly as I sat at the kitchen table, rehearsing what I would say to Lindsay. The time difference meant it was afternoon in Paris, perfect for a call. I took a deep breath and dialed her number. After a few rings, her voice was bright and cheerful, and I could hear the bustling sounds of a European city in the background. Without waiting, I told her I needed to understand something. She sounded distracted, probably looking at some monument or a shop window, as she asked me what I meant. I told her I had seen the photos on Facebook and knew that Todd's parents were there with them. There was a long pause, and then her voice became defensive. She said they could explain. I reminded her that she had told me the trip was family only. Her tone shifted, becoming cold, and she said that Todd had decided I was overwhelming and that he didn't want his vacation ruined. The word overwhelming hit me like a physical blow. I told her I was the one who had planned the trip and bought the tickets, while Todd's parents had paid for their own. I told her I had never expected them to constantly take care of me. She interrupted, saying they had never asked for a guilt trip. I could hear Todd laughing about something in the background, his voice carefree and oblivious. The sound made my jaw clench. Lindsay's voice hardened as she went on, telling me that Todd was right and that I was too needy. The phone felt heavy in my hand. I told her I understood, and she said it was good and that they would talk when they got back. I simply said, understood, and hung up without saying goodbye. I set the phone down with deliberate care. The word needy was just echoing in my mind like a curse. I walked to my office, drawn by some instinct I couldn't name. The walls were covered with family photos. Me teaching Lindsay to ride a bike, her graduation from college, and her wedding day when I had walked her down the aisle with tears of pride in my eyes. My hands slowly clenched into fists as I stared at these images of a relationship I had apparently misunderstood completely. In one photo, I was holding baby Lindsay. My reflection in the glass showed an older man, harder now, with something cold growing in his eyes. I reached out and straightened the photo frame with careful, precise movements. This small action felt significant somehow, as if I was adjusting more than just a crooked picture. I remained in my office after the call, surrounded by evidence of what I had thought was love but was apparently just usefulness. Each photo on the wall told a story I was only now beginning to understand properly. I remembered paying $30,000 for that wedding day, making sure every detail was perfect because I wanted her to be happy. I had covered her student loans when Todd couldn't find work after his graduation. I had even co-signed their mortgage when the banks wouldn't approve them on their own. In Christmas photos, they were opening expensive gifts that I had bought. At birthdays, my presents were opened last, almost as an afterthought. Each memory added weight to my chest, a growing pressure that made it hard to breathe. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out bank statements and receipts I had kept out of habit. The $80,000 down payment for their house, which came from my retirement fund. The car payments I had taken over when Todd lost his first job. The credit card bills I had paid when they couldn't make ends meet, and the vacation fund I had been building for years, money that had bought their tickets to Europe. But it wasn't just the money. I remembered plans and sacrifices I had made that went deeper than just dollars. I had canceled a fishing trip with old friends because Lindsay needed a babysitter. The woman from my book club had asked me to dinner, but I had said no because Lindsay needed help moving. I had postponed my own travel dreams again and again while I supported theirs. At Sunday dinners, Todd barely acknowledged my presence, and at holiday gatherings, I often felt like an outsider. He had subtly made me feel unwelcome in their lives while simultaneously accepting my financial support. The pattern was so clear now that I could not believe I had missed it. My hands shook as I turned the photos face down, unable to look at them anymore. The word needy just kept repeating in my head. Suddenly, with startling clarity, I understood the difference between being loved and simply being useful. They hadn't wanted me in their lives. They had just wanted me to fund their lives. I stood up so fast that my chair rolled backward and hit the wall. In the mirror above my desk, my reflection showed a person who had been taken advantage of for years. I had confused generosity with love, and in return, I had received manipulation and betrayal. The reflection showed a man who had been patient, giving, and trusting, and had been repaid with dismissal and betrayal. I opened my laptop and stared at my bank account dashboard, the cursor hovering over the section where both Lindsay and Todd had access to my accounts. My finger trembled over the trackpad. I was one click away from changing everything, but I closed the laptop without clicking. The action was suspended, and a tension was building inside me, like a storm gathering strength. I sat in the heavy silence of my office, the laptop closed before me like a door I was not ready to open yet. The weight of years of manipulation was pressing down on my shoulders, and I found myself staring at the family photos I had turned face down. The quiet house seemed to hold its breath around me. Then my phone broke the silence with a familiar ping from my banking app. I almost ignored it, expecting another spam notification. But something made me pick it up. Perhaps it was just a need for any distraction from the dark thoughts swirling in my mind. The screen showed an account alert for a processed transaction. I opened the banking app with my fingerprint. Instead of my monthly utility bill or grocery store charge, the transaction details appeared like a punch to the gut. Restaurant Le Fouquet's, Paris, France. The timestamp showed 2 hours ago, which would have been their lunchtime in Paris. My mind connected the dots with painful clarity. Lindsay had used my authorized user card. I had given her emergency access years ago when she was struggling to build credit. The irony burned in my chest. They had excluded me from their family vacation, but were using my money to pay for their fancy Parisian meals. I scrolled through recent transactions with growing disbelief. Hotel charges, boutique shopping, and tourist attractions were all on my card. All of this was happening while Todd's parents were supposedly paying for their own way and not expecting us to constantly take care of them. I stood up, pacing around my office with the phone clutched in my hand. Every family photo on the wall looked different now, like evidence in a case I was finally beginning to understand. The phrase, "This is my chance," formed in my mind, clear and certain. I opened the card management section of the app and navigated to authorized users. Lindsay's name sat there in black digital letters, representing years of financial access that I had granted out of love, but had received only manipulation in return. Another notification pinged on my screen, a charge for a boutique in Paris. She was shopping while I was sitting alone in my house, processing their betrayal. That's what decided it for me. My finger hovered over the Remove User button for just a moment. Years of being the supportive father were warring with the growing certainty that support and exploitation were different things. The confirmation screen appeared. I was asked if I was sure, because the action could not be undone. I selected yes, and chose to remove her access immediately. The screen confirmed that the authorized user access was revoked. I felt my first taste of real control in years, a sensation that was both foreign and satisfying. I set the phone down on my desk with deliberate care, looking at my reflection in the dark computer screen. For the first time in days, a small smile crossed my face. I walked to my kitchen to make coffee, and my movements were more purposeful than they had been since I received that first devastating text. The coffee maker gurgled to life, and through my window I could hear my neighbor's lawn mower starting up. Ordinary life was continuing while my quiet revolution began. The next morning, I was at my kitchen table, actually enjoying my coffee for the first time in days. The morning paper was spread before me, and I was reading about local high school graduations when my phone rang with aggressive persistence. I recognized the international number and checked the time. It was 9 a.m. here, which meant 4 p.m. in Paris. I let it ring twice before answering, as I was no longer eager to please or worried about missing their call. I said, "Good morning to you too, Lindsay," and could hear her sharp intake of breath on the other end. Her voice was immediately demanding. There were no pleasantries or concern about how I was doing. I told her I had removed her access to my account. She said I could not do that, as she had tried to pay for lunch and the card had been declined in front of Todd's parents. She said it was humiliating and that she needed the card. I calmly replied that I thought they did not need me taking care of them constantly. She said that was completely different, and after a pause I could hear a muffled conversation in the background before her voice came back with venom. She threatened me, saying that if I did not fix it right away there would be consequences. When I asked what kind of consequences, she said that she and Todd had been talking and were looking into care facilities for me when they got back. My coffee cup paused halfway to my lips. She said I was getting older and obviously could not handle my finances responsibly. The cruelty in her tone was breathtaking. She told me they would sell my house to pay for it, saying I didn't need all that space anyway. I heard Todd's voice in the background, telling her to say it was for my own good. I sat in a long silence, processing these threats. They wanted to institutionalize me and sell my home because I had stopped funding their vacation spending. The audacity of it was staggering. She asked if I was listening. I told her I heard every word. She told me to fix it. I told her no. She asked me what I meant by no. I repeated myself. I told her to enjoy the rest of her family vacation, and she told me not to dare hang up. I hung up and set the phone face down on the table. My hands were steady as I took a long sip of coffee, looking out my kitchen window at my well-maintained yard. This was my house. I had lived in it for 30 years, paid it off in full, and my name alone was on the deed. It was the house they thought they could sell to put me in a convenient place. I stood up with a new purpose, leaving my coffee unfinished, and walked toward my home office with determined steps. There was work to be done. I pulled my house deed from the filing cabinet, spreading it across my desk like a battle plan. But it was not my own deed I was studying. It was the second property document, the one for Lindsay and Todd's house on Maple Street. My name alone was on the title, just as it had been since I bought it for them. I remembered the conversation from 2 years ago. They had said it was just for the mortgage approval and that they would transfer it to their names once everything was settled. They had been too busy with their lives to handle the paperwork, always promising to get around to it next month, next season, or next year. I found Marcus Chen's business card in my desk drawer. He had sold me both properties and was a trustworthy man who understood discretion. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. The drive to his office took me through familiar Davenport streets. A neighbor waved from her garden as I backed out of my driveway, her friendly gesture a reminder of how ordinary this morning appeared to be. 20 minutes later, I parked at Chen's real estate, which was in a restored Victorian that Marcus had converted into his office. Marcus looked up from his computer when I entered, a look of surprise and pleasure crossing his face. He said it was good to see me and asked how retirement was treating me. I told him I needed to sell the Maple Street property quickly. He paused, his experienced eyes reading something in my expression. He asked if everything was all right. I told him everything was fine and that I just needed it sold. I asked him what the market was like, and he turned to his computer, pulling up comparable sales with professional efficiency. He said the market was hot and that a property like that in that neighborhood would go for somewhere between $180,000 and $190,000. The numbers hit me with satisfaction. I had paid $130,000 2 years ago. Marcus asked how quickly I wanted it sold, and I told him as soon as possible and to price it to move. He pulled out the listing paperwork and property inspection schedules. His movements were practiced and reassuring. He said his team could be there tomorrow for photos and staging. I told him the house was occupied but that Lindsay was in Europe and that I had the keys. Marcus looked slightly confused but professionally accepting. We discussed the listing price, commission, and closing timelines. I signed the listing agreement, my signature firm and decisive. He said he would start marketing immediately, and in this market we could have offers within days. We shook hands, and I appreciated his professionalism and the way he asked no unnecessary questions. Walking back to my car, I felt lighter than I had in days. The classical music from my radio filled the silence as I drove slowly through downtown Davenport, seeing my hometown with new eyes. At a red light, a young family crossed the crosswalk. A father was carrying a toddler, and a mother was pushing a stroller. I remembered when Lindsay was that age, before everything became about money and manipulation, and what I could provide rather than who I was. I pulled into my driveway and sat for a moment, looking at my mailbox with my name on it. The name felt different now, as if it meant something again. I walked up my front steps, keys jingling in my hand, a sound that promised more changes were coming. Inside my house, I opened my laptop and found an email notification from the real estate listing service. Property listed successfully appeared on the screen, and I felt a surge of satisfaction. But there was more work to be done. I opened a new browser tab and searched for Moving Services Davenport, Iowa. Large corporate companies filled the first results, but I scrolled past them, looking for something personal and reliable. I found Dave's Honest Moving, a small operation with good reviews, which was family-owned for 15 years, the kind of business where you talk to the owner, not a call center. I dialed the number, hoping for exactly that. A voice answered, "Dave's Moving. This is Dave." The voice was deep and straightforward, without a corporate script. I told him I needed help moving some belongings tomorrow, and that it was a time-sensitive situation. He asked me what kind of timeline we were talking about, and I told him tomorrow morning, if possible, as it was a full house worth of items. He asked where we were moving to and from, and I gave him Lindsay's address, explaining that everything needed to go to storage. He asked if I had a storage unit lined up, and I realized I needed to arrange that, too. He recommended a storage facility and gave me their number, saying he worked with them all the time. Within minutes, I had Janet from Secure Storage on a three-way call discussing logistics. Dave advised me that for a full house, I would want at least a 10 by 20 unit. Janet added that the first month would be $120, paid in advance. I told her I would take it and asked if someone could meet us there tomorrow. Back on the phone with Dave, we finalized the details. He told me he would bring his truck and 2 guys, and that they could start at 8 a.m. I provided Lindsay's Maple Street address again and added that the residents were out of town and that I would prefer to have everything done before they returned. Dave's tone suggested he had navigated these waters before, saying he understood. "Something like that," I said. He told me he had been there himself and would be efficient and respectful. After ending the calls and paying for the storage unit online, I made myself dinner with an appetite I hadn't felt in days. I set my alarm for 6:30 a.m., earlier than my usual retirement schedule, and laid out some work clothes, my old jeans and boots from my contracting days. Back then, I was someone who was pursuing his own dreams instead of funding others. I sat in my living room and watched the evening news with newfound attention. The weather forecast promised clear skies, perfect for moving. Everything was falling into place with a precision that felt both satisfying and inevitable. That night, I double-checked that my phone was charging and set it on my nightstand next to a glass of water. In the bathroom mirror, while brushing my teeth, I saw a reflection of someone I barely recognized. A person ready for action, someone who had stopped waiting for permission and was taking control of his own life. I arrived at the Maple Street property at 7:45 a.m., 15 minutes early, as was my habit. The familiar house now looked different to me. It wasn't my daughter's home anymore. It was simply a property that needed to be cleared. Dave's moving truck was already parked outside, its engine running, and the exhaust was visible in the crisp morning air. Dave emerged from the cab as I pulled up. He was a sturdy man in his 50s with the practical demeanor of someone who had handled countless family situations without judgment. His 2 crew members, younger guys in matching company shirts, were already unloading equipment with efficient movements. Dave extended a work-roughened hand and told me he was ready to get started. I unlocked the front door with my spare key. The house was silent and empty, in a way that felt appropriate. We walked through room by room, and Dave assessed the furniture and personal items with a professional eye. He told me it would take about 3 or 4 hours, making notes on his clipboard. I pointed out that everything belonged to Lindsay and Todd. The expensive sectional sofa I had bought them last Christmas, Todd's elaborate home office with gaming equipment, and Lindsay's extensive wardrobe that filled 2 walk-in closets. The crew started with boxes from the bedrooms, wrapping and labeling with systematic care. I insisted on helping despite Dave's protests. I told him I was not that old, which earned a grin from one of the younger workers. Soon, I was carrying boxes labeled Lindsay's books and Todd's sports equipment, feeling a strange satisfaction at seeing their possessions being packed away so methodically. In their bedroom closet, I found photo albums from their wedding. Flipping through, I noticed I was conspicuously absent from most of the pictures. Todd's family was prominent in every shot, while I appeared in maybe 3 photos, always at the edges. I closed the album and handed it to Dave's crew. Room by room, we cleared out expensive items that I had forgotten I had bought them. Designer handbags, electronics, and the leather dining set I had purchased for their first anniversary. My back started to ache, but I pushed through, driven by a purpose I hadn't felt in years. In what would have been a future nursery, I found baby furniture they had optimistically assembled for grandchildren that never came. For a moment, doubt crept in, and I wondered if I was being too harsh. But then I found Todd's credit card statements, showing luxury purchases he had made while they claimed poverty to me, and the doubt evaporated completely. Dave noticed my pause and asked if I was okay. I told him it was just memories and that we should keep going. By 11:30 a.m., we finished our final walkthrough of the empty house. Rooms echoed differently now, as the afternoon sunlight streamed through the bare windows and onto the vacant floors. I locked up and pocketed the keys, following the moving truck to secure storage, where I watched their belongings disappear into Unit 47B. I paid Dave in cash and added a generous tip. He said he hoped everything worked out for me, and his warmth felt genuine. Driving home alone, I saw my phone light up with a Facebook notification. I pulled into my garage, and the device was still buzzing in the cup holder, as if it was an insistent reminder that my quiet morning was about to become much more complicated. Inside my house, I finally checked the buzzing phone and found multiple Facebook notifications. Lindsay had posted angry status updates. The comments showed friends asking what had happened, with Lindsay playing the victim to perfection. I closed Facebook without responding and called Marcus Chin back. His voice was excited. He said he had great news and that we had a serious buyer with a cash offer already. He said it was a young couple who had just relocated here for work and that they loved the neighborhood. He said the offer was $185,000, which was higher than we expected. I was satisfied with the number. I asked him when they wanted to close, and he said they wanted to close immediately and move in this weekend, if possible. I checked my calendar. It was Thursday. Marcus's enthusiasm was infectious. I told him to make it happen and that I would have the paperwork ready by tomorrow. Friday morning, I was at the title company office, signing papers with methodical precision. I met the buyers, Michael and Sarah Thompson, who were a hopeful young couple in their early 30s. Sarah said they loved what I had done with the landscaping, and I didn't mention it wasn't my landscaping. Michael said it was perfect and accepted the keys. He told me they could move in tomorrow morning. The bank transfer confirmation appeared on my phone. $185,000 minus the realtor fees equaled a $17,500 profit. I had turned my gesture of paternal love into a solid business win. Saturday morning, I decided to drive by the property one last time. I arrived to see a U-Haul truck in the driveway. Michael and Sarah were directing movers with infectious energy. A baby crib was being carried inside. A young family was starting fresh in a house that had seen too much disappointment. I parked across the street and watched Sarah plant flowers in the front garden, while Michael assembled a swing set in the backyard. My phone rang with an international number, and I answered just as a taxi pulled up to the house. Perfect timing. Lindsay stepped out first, exhausted from travel but immediately alert as she surveyed the scene. Todd paid the driver, and his face shifted from confusion to alarm as he processed the U-Haul truck and strangers in what he considered his driveway. Todd called out to Sarah, asking her what she was doing in his house. Michael appeared in the doorway, paperwork in hand. He said he thought there had been a mistake. I got out of my car and walked calmly toward the scene, pulling an envelope from my jacket pocket. Lindsay spotted me, and her face shifted from confusion to understanding to pure fury in the span of 3 seconds. She demanded to know what was going on and why strangers were in their house. Michael and Sarah exchanged worried glances. Sarah was still holding her gardening trowel as if she might need to defend her new home. Todd told Michael that he didn't know who he was, but that he needed to move his belongings out immediately. Michael held up his paperwork and said he had the deed and that they had closed yesterday. Todd said it was impossible, that it was their house. Sarah's voice was small but determined, and she said maybe they should call the police. I stepped forward, my voice carrying the calm authority I had learned in my years managing construction projects. I told them that wouldn't be necessary. Lindsay's tone turned demanding. She told me to fix it. I addressed Michael and Sarah first, telling them I was sorry for the confusion and that they should continue with their move. Then I turned to Lindsay and Todd. The house was sold because it belonged to me. Todd's face reddened. He asked me what I meant by belonged to me. I told him to check the original deed. It had never been transferred to their names. Lindsay's voice rose to that familiar shriek. She told me I could not just sell their home. I replied evenly that I could sell my own property, and that's exactly what I did. Todd was practically shouting now. He said it was theft and that they would sue me. I asked him with what money, telling him I believed his credit cards were declined in Paris. Michael whispered something to Sarah, who nodded and started toward their front door. I told them to please go inside and that this didn't concern them. Lindsay's voice turned desperate, asking where they were supposed to live and where their things were. I extended the envelope I had been holding. Todd snatched it, tearing it open with angry fingers. He read aloud, "Secure storage. Unit 47B, Brady Street. Storage." Lindsay's voice cracked, and she said I had put their life in storage. I told her I had preserved everything carefully and that the first month's rent was paid. Todd crumpled the paper and said it was insane and that I could not do this to family. I reminded them that family doesn't exclude fathers from family vacations. Todd stepped closer, trying to intimidate me. He said they would contest this and fight me in court. I told him the sale was legal because the property was mine. Lindsay's voice turned manipulative, and she asked me how I could do this to my own daughter. I looked at her for a long moment. I asked her how she could do what she did to her own father. Sarah emerged from the house, and concern was evident in her voice. She asked if everything was all right. I told her everything was fine and to enjoy her new home. Lindsay and Todd stood on the sidewalk, their European luggage still in hand, looking like tourists who had taken a wrong turn into someone else's life. I walked back to my car with measured steps, my work boots solid on the pavement. Todd shouted behind me that it wasn't over. I got into my car and started the engine. The classical music resumed where it had left off. I said to myself, yes, it is. 3 months later, I was reading the morning paper when my doorbell rang. A process server handed me legal documents. Lindsay and Todd's lawsuit. I signed for them without surprise. By afternoon, I was reviewing the court's decision in my kitchen. The lawsuit was dismissed. The property owner had the legal right to sell his own property. The judge had been thorough and unsympathetic to their claims. Todd and Lindsay were responsible for their own attorney fees. My lawyer called within an hour and said it was a clean victory and that they had no grounds for appeal. The local newspaper ran a small article about a family property dispute being resolved. The town's gossip network had been buzzing for months. At the coffee shop, I overheard conversations. Some people said they always thought that son-in-law seemed entitled, and others said I had worked hard my whole life and deserved better. Some disapproving voices murmured that family should stick together. but I had learned to let others' opinions roll off me like water. I ran into Marcus Chun at the hardware store, and he asked me how I was doing with everything. I told him I was doing better than I had expected. That afternoon, I visited a pet store I had noticed months ago. A 3-year-old golden retriever named Max was looking for a new home because his family was moving overseas. The owner explained that he had been with a family, was good with people, and loved car rides. I knelt down, and Max approached immediately, his tail wagging as if he had been waiting specifically for me. The connection was instant. Max seemed to understand my loneliness, and I recognized his need for a companion who would not abandon him. An hour later, Max was riding in the passenger seat of my car, his head out the window. Both of us were heading toward something new. That first night, he slept by my bed, and for the first time in months, neither of us felt alone. With Max at my feet, I researched travel trailers online. My search led me to articles about freedom and adventure. At RV dealerships, salespeople were eager to help. I test drove a 25-foot Airstream, a perfect size for one person and a dog who had claimed the passenger seat before we had even signed the papers. I used the trade-in value of my second car plus my savings to purchase it outright. Max loved RV life immediately. We planned our route to national parks and small towns, places I had always wanted to see but had postponed for family obligations. The morning we left, my house was prepared for an extended absence. I had arranged for a mail hold and asked neighbors to watch the property. While loading the trailer, I packed camping gear, Max's supplies, and one photo album. Pictures of Lindsay as a child before disappointment had changed us both. Max sensed adventure coming, and his excitement was infectious as I started the engine and checked the trailer connection. We drove through Davenport one last time, past familiar places that looked smaller now. Passing Maple Street, I saw Michael and Sarah's children playing in the yard. The house was finally filled with the joy it was meant to hold. The highway sign read, Colorado, 500 miles. Max had his head out the window, and my hand was steady on the steering wheel. Both of us were finally free. That evening, we stopped at a scenic overlook in Colorado. I opened a camping chair as the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple I had never taken the time to notice before. Max settled beside me, content and loyal, with no agenda beyond companionship. For the first time in years, I was exactly where I belonged.